YouTube. Today we're going to replace the grease inside this KitchenAid mixer, and according to KitchenAid's website, you're supposed to replace the grease almost every year for regular maintenance if you use this quite frequently. If not, still you have to replace the grease frequent because the grease itself will dry up. So some of the tools you need are maybe a gasket, and I'll talk about gaskets later, screwdrivers. I like cut up pieces of cardboard. I'll explain why later on. Punches and grease. There are many different types of grease, and we'll go over that a little bit later. So you start by going to the back. There is a Phillips screw right here. So we'll just remove it and put it aside. Now, I like to use a piece of paper with a drawing of the mixer, labeled front and back, and to keep track where does each screw go, you can just push the screw into the paper and it'll keep track of where each screw should go. So now we can lift up this back cover. Alright, next thing, we're going to remove the beauty band. 2 Phillips screws. 1, 2. And just like before, I'll put it right here on the piece of paper. Now the beauty band might be greasy. As you can see, this one is pretty greasy. So let's take paper towel. By the way, you're going to use a lot of paper towel. So I have a trash can nearby. Let's just wipe this down. Alright, let's put that to the side. So we're going to turn this around, and we're also going to wipe down the side where the beauty band sat. Let's next remove the cord. You can see the cord is inserted. All you have to do is just wiggle it out. Alright, let's turn this mixer around, and we're going to remove this strip ring right here. This strip ring, sometimes you can just pull it out. Nope, can't. So if you can't, you might see a little gap, right? And you can insert your flathead at an angle and gently tap it out. See that? Ooh, I actually have a piece of cloth right here that I forgot to put down. Where you can see the drip ring has a lot of dried up grease. I'm just going to empty it into a trash can and clean up this ring. So as you can see, this is all clean. Let's put this aside. Now we need to remove the planetary pin. So as you can see, I'm going to turn this towards you. There is a pin right here. I'm going to use a punch, hammer it out. And my punch isn't skinny enough. I have a small Phillips screwdriver that I can now push it completely out. There you go. So after that's done, now I'm going to pull off the planetary by pulling down. This should come out easily, but if it doesn't, we'll just use a flathead screwdriver, and you lever on this screw, give it a little pull, and there's going to be a lot more dried up grease that will fall out from here, potentially. Just like before, I'm going to wipe away all this grease real quick. So as I clean up this planetary, also you want to clean up around these passages and also even down in here too. Now underneath this bottom housing has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 screws. This one happened to be use the SQ1 square bit. That's a SQ1 square bit. You might have a flathead for the older versions. Now once we're done with that, underneath here has 2 other screws. They are a little bit different. And after we're done with those two, turn this around and there's two more at the back. Now, these two back screws look very similar to the front one, except they should have a washer. Alright, the washer's on this one. And there's always one washer. It doesn't matter if the washer goes to the left or to the right, there needs to be at least a washer on it, so I am going to keep this to the left. And look, that's it. There's all the screws right there. In order to remove the upper housing, you're going to use a flathead screwdriver, and since you don't want to mar the paint, you'll wrap your flathead in the cloth and you'll put the flathead in these gaps in the side, and you can start prying up. Oh, one more thing. Lock this head while you pull it up. Now it's loose. Now I can just pull up the upper housing just like that. I want to show a couple of things as I pull the upper housing off. There should be a black gasket around here. That black gasket got transferred over here. Also, one of the gears fell out from there. It's fine. Just know that can fall out, and when we put it back together, we have to pay attention to our angle. And right now, these big blob of grease, black grease, it's oxidized. We need to just use a scoop. That's where I like to use these cardboards and just scoop it and throw it away. Alright, now we can remove the planetary shaft right here. To do so, you push it up. Let's tap it from the bottom with a hammer. So you can see there is a pin. Just pull it out. Next, we need to remove the shaft by now pushing it down. Now if it is a little stuck, you can use hammer and gently persuade it to go down. Alright, as you pull it out, on the bottom of the planetary has a ring. Now this ring might have fallen out when you pulled this out. But the grease usually holds it in place. So that is the bottom gasket. It's one of two that you'll see in a second. Let's wipe down the shaft and also put that aside. Alright, now we can remove this gear right here. When you pick it up, there is a second gasket on the bottom. Oh, it was actually stuck on the gear. Now we can wipe down this gear. Next, let's use another piece of cardboard and scrape up all the remaining big chunks of grease everywhere. Okay, once all that's been removed, now we can remove the worm gear right here. There are 3 Phillips screws, and there is a ring underneath it, so don't forget the ring. So remaining, you'll see that there are puddles of grease on the side right here. Now I have this small little piece of plastic. It's actually used to replace cell phone cases, but it doesn't matter. It's just a small plastic, and it comes in really handy to scoop out grease. Next, what I'm going to do is, there's still puddles of grease on the bottom. I'm just going to put a big piece of paper towel on top of it, flip it around, And as you can tell down here, I'm just going to wipe that down while waiting for the grease on the other side to drain out. Alright, this looks like has strained up quite a bit. Now it's not perfectly drained, but it's pretty close and good enough. Alright, it should be like that, and you can just pull it out and wipe it down. Okay, now we have these three main gears right here, and we want to clean them up very well. We also have one more in the upper housing, but we'll get to that one later. So when we clean these gears, we also want to do another thing is inspect them, see if there are any wear to the teeth. This can happen if you haven't changed the grease in a long time, and you want to go through each knot and remove the grease. Now you might ask why. First of all, when you remove the grease, you can then clearly see how, like, what quality of wear each teeth is at. But second of all is that there are shavings from the metal, from the plastic, and these shavings get trapped into the teeth. And if you don't remove it, they act like sandpaper. It's just going to wear down the teeth even more. When we replace the new grease, we want the new grease to get into those the teeth, between the teeth. So even though this sounds pretty tedious, but now is the time to go through, remove the grease in each of the teeth. Alright, next let's clean up the worm gear. I'm going to start removing bigger chunks of grease from here. In order to clean this up really well, you can see right here there's a pin on that slides through here. That pin is one you should use a 1/16" puncher to punch it out. Once you punch it out, there is a gasket down here, there's a gasket on top. This slides out and you can clean up the whole shaft and everything. Also, if you need to replace these gears, that's what you should do. Since I'm only changing the grease and I don't have a 1/16 punch, this is how I normally clean the grease behind the worm wheel and the gear down here. Take a piece of paper towel, make a couple of folds, and you just feed in from the side and just turn the gear. And as you can see on this side, as we turn, it pushes out all of that grease. Okay, so I don't know if you can tell, but this is pretty clean. There's no more grease at the back. You can see through at the back of the worm gear. There's light shining through. Last is this final gear right here. So now all three gears are cleaned up. Nothing needs to be replaced, so that's a good thing. Also, another indicator if you have a lot of wear is that if you see metal shavings in the grease. I didn't see any metal shavings in the grease, so I think these gears are fine. Now we're going to move our attention to the upper housing. Okay, this is the upper housing, and just like before, our goal is to just remove the grease. Wipe it down and remove it. And also there is a gasket The gasket's clean. Let's put this out of the way. And just like before, remove all this big chunk of grease. In the upper housing, on the side right here, has a little groove. It's got a lot of grease packed into it. Scrape that out. This worm gear right here, just like before, you can use a flathead screwdriver, piece of plastic or that cardboard, and try to scrape the grease out of it. And finally, this shaft right here, I'm going to take a paper cloth and fold it, and fold it, and fold it.
So here's my take on gasket and grease. First, let's talk about gaskets. Right here, this is the OEM original KitchenAid gasket. And as you can see, the material, the gasket material is made by Interface, and it is a NI-2085 gasket material. It is a high-grade gasket material. On Amazon's website, they have many different gaskets, and basically what you pay is what you get. Now, on the surface, it seems like this brand right here sells a Interface gasket, and I actually bought it. It says it sells a Interface MP15, which is a very good gasket material as well. However, what I got was not that material. For it to have such a high review, maybe at first it did sell the good quality gasket material, and later on it switched to cheaper material. Same as some of these other ones, they seem to use a S8091 if it's a gray color, and again, good quality gasket material. And they started out with it, but then later on they even change the graphic. This is my recommendation for gasket. If your KitchenAid gasket is still intact, still pretty good, then just reuse your original KitchenAid gasket. I would not replace it unless it's torn. And if it is torn, then I would buy the original OEM gasket, and I would pay more for something that's a higher quality, that's guaranteed. Second, let's talk about grease. Now, all of these grease right here are their own brand. I don't know what's really packed into it, and I can't really trust them. If their gasket is, if they're cheaping out on gasket, then they're probably cheaping out on the grease. So the grease that is used is called the 930-2, and again, it's a high-end grease, right? It's a NLGI number 2. The one I like to use is Superlube. Superlube right here. It's also NLGI grade 2, heavy duty, multi-purpose. It's also NSF H1, which is food safe, right? If it accidentally gets in contact. And as you can see, this is a name brand with really great reviews. This is what I recommend, and it's also really cheap too in comparison with everything else. For about $17, one of this 14-ounce can replace your grease twice in your KitchenAid mixer. This is what I recommend you to get. I will have the link to this in my description.
Here's the hub gear, and I'm going to take some grease, loop this shaft right here, put it in, and just add generous amount of grease on here. Put some grease in here too, and we'll put some grease in around this gear, and in this groove shove some grease in there too, and just put a lot of grease on here. That looks pretty good. Now I'm going to shift to the bottom housing. So we can next put the worm gear back on. There are two little nubs right there, tabs. You just put it on top. So now we can put grease on here. I'll take a generous amount, start feeding it through the worm gear. Lube the top, lube the bottom. Spin it. Let me change the angle real quick. Alright, so I pack it and I turn it. And make sure all these gears get grease in it. Now lube the bottom. Right here, put a generous amount of grease. And here's the gasket. Put the gasket on top. Dab some grease on the gasket as well. Now put the gear on top of it. Lube the shaft a little bit. Now you can slide it through, go all the way to the top. And if it's stuck, you can use a hammer and gently tap it, which I think I need to do that. Gently tap, 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 tap. All right. That looks good. Okay, now we can take the smaller pin, put it in, turn it to the right direction. So you can see this aligns with the gear down here. Put it down into it. Alright, now let's continue. Put generous amount of grease. You want all the teeth to have grease. That looks pretty good. Now we can put the gasket on here. Now actually I put a little bit of grease all over the gasket, and it doesn't matter if the gasket is facing up or down. The orientation doesn't matter, as long as, let me move this a little bit back. You can see this little tab right here. Just make sure that it falls into this tab so it's in the right location. So let's put the upper housing. Now, I don't know if you remember earlier, but the gear down there fell out earlier when I was picking it up, so remember to point it downward so the gear doesn't fall out. And you want it to just slide through the shaft. So let's turn, put it over, and let it go down. Now while it's doing that, this cable behind here, you want to make sure that none of the wires get pinched. So let's turn this around. Let's look at the back. Okay, so you want to push this back in here, this cord back in here, and one side is round, the other side is flat. You want the flat side facing out, and you want to make sure that none of these cables get pinched while you're pushing this down. Now when you're pushing this down, it might not want to fit. Oh, I got lucky. It did just fall right in and fit really well. If it doesn't fit well, then you would go to the front and turn this shaft, like with a screwdriver. See that? To make sure that the gear will align correctly so it can fall down, like fall right into place. You can see there's some grease at the side. Let's just wipe that down. So let's turn this around. You remember there are two screws right here. Now it doesn't matter if it goes left or right, but I like to just put it back where it was. Put back the two screws here. Now we can put these 5 screws back on. Next, gasket. You can the gasket in. Now we need to add more grease to both of these. You can pack some grease into, well, I'll pack it in here first. And you don't have to go too crazy on grease. I might have got too much. That's okay. I'll spread grease around all of these teeth right here. After you finish assembling this mixer, you're going to have some smooth hands. All of this high-grade grease. Okay. Now we can push it in place. Now we need to put this pin back into the planetary. Okay, so you can see that the shaft is pushed upwards, and even though I can align it to the hole, but only half of it is showing. So you take a 1/16 punch, or I have a screwdriver that is small, and then I just wiggle this down. And as you can see, it aligns correctly. So I take this, put it in here, and take a punch and hammer it through. Alright, and we can now put the cover back on the bottom. Just align, push upwards. If it doesn't seem to go all the way quite in, you can take a rubber mallet and gently tap it back in. That looks good enough. Now let's put the beauty band back on. 2 screws. Now the back cover. There are 2 lips right here that connects to these 2 spots. So make sure that your wire is out of the way, doesn't clip into it. That's it. I hope this video is helpful. If it is, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe if you want. Thank you.